It matters because in studies that have been done of hundreds of outstanding business leaders, the core characteristic that stood out wasn't where they went to school, it wasn't how tall they were, it wasn't birth order, it wasn't eye color, it wasn't any of that jazz. It was pattern recognition. Superb abilities in pattern recognition. Now, what do you need for pattern recognition? You need lots and lots of data. What do women pick up all day, every day, even when we don't want to? Lots and lots of data. Let me give you an example of how this works. Carol Latham, in the late 80s, was a chemist working for Ohio, which was eventually bought by BP in Cleveland, Ohio. She'd taken 18 years off work to raise her kids. They were now going to college. She went back to work, working in ceramics. And she noticed that the personal computing revolution was becoming quite a big thing. Bear in mind, she doesn't work in computers. Cleveland isn't Silicon Valley. But she thinks, that's kind of interesting. And then she asks one of the best business questions of all time, in my opinion. She thinks, if this is a big thing, what's going to stop it? What is the gating factor here? And she thinks about it for a while, and she thinks, it's going to be heat. Because as processing power increases, computers get very hot. And when they get very hot, they stop. And some of you probably remember when we all used to have laptops that had very noisy fans that would suddenly start up at surprising moments, right, to stay cool, because if they didn't stay cool, they'd stop. So Carol thinks, so heat's going to be a real problem. So what can you do about that? And because she's a chemist, she thinks, well, you could invent some interesting kind of materials that might dissipate the heat. She goes to her boss and she says, I've had this really cool idea, personal computers, heat, getting rid of the heat, that's solving a problem, that's a business. And he says, Carol, don't be ridiculous. Come on, you're in ceramics, go back to work. Actually, he does something really funny. A couple of times this happened. He sends her off on exec ed programs, like, could you just please shut up and go away? So she does, she shuts up and she goes away for a while. And finally, like so many of these women, she can't stand it any longer. And she quits her job. She rents out the big family house, because the kids are off at college now. She rents a tiny apartment in downtown Cleveland, and she funds her business on the difference. And for a couple of years, she labors pretty much in the wilderness, making these different materials that look pretty much like bright green and bright purple cookie dough. And she doesn't have the money to afford very fancy instruments to calibrate the impact of her material, but she reckons that what she's making is a 10x improvement on anything out there in the marketplace. And she's sitting in this tiny office one day and thinking about how to market it, how to start getting some revenue in. And the phone rings, and it's a guy from Intel, and he has a problem. They're about to introduce a new chip. It's called the Pentium chip, and it has one very, very big problem. It gets really hot. And he says, do you think you could help me? And she said, yeah, I think I probably could. There's a little bit of Carol Latham inside everybody's laptop today. How did she know that? How did she know it before any other firm even commissioned the market research? She just kind of connected the dots. She wasn't in computing. She wasn't in Silicon Valley. She just looked around her, swept up all this data, and thought, there's something happening here, and there's some problems, and where there are problems, there are businesses.